All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Um, my name is David Kadaba. I am joining you from Washington, D.C. I'm on the Telos team, and if this is your first time joining us at a Telos event, the Telos Group is an American-based nonprofit based here in Washington, D.C. that forms communities of American peacemakers across lines of difference and equips them to help reconcile seemingly intractable conflict at home and abroad. We are so excited today to talk about Seeing Israel-Palestine, an introduction to Telos travel. In a minute, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jack Saba, the director, our program director in our Jaffa office. But before I do so, just a quick note on questions. We will have a designated time for Q&A at the second half of this call. So as you have questions, feel free to hold on to them and prepare them for the second half, or send them in the chat or to myself as the host. But without further ado, I want to introduce Jack to lead us in this call.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jack Saba. I see a few Telos alumni, so you guys recognize me. And I'm the Telos program director here in Israel, Palestine. I'm based out of my hometown of Jaffa, and I've been with Telos leading and coordinating trips for the past 6.5 years, although the past year and a half don't really count as far as trips go. As I said, I'm originally from Jaffa, but I also grew up in Syracuse, New York, and spent some time in Washington, D.C. for college. And as you'll learn, if you join a Telos trip, there are multi-layered national, ethnic, and religious identities here. So for example, I'm an Israeli citizen since Jaffa is inside of Israel, right next to Tel Aviv. But I also come from a Palestinian Christian family. So at home, we speak some Arabic, peppered with English, and Hebrew in the public space. The official language in Israel is Hebrew, right? So if you have any questions about all that, well, you're just going to have to come on a trip and spend a week with us here on the ground. You might also get to meet my colleague, Carly, who has a fascinating background. Carly is Jewish and was born and grew up in Australia. And about 3 years ago, she moved to Israel and got Israeli citizenship. So she's officially an Israeli Aussie. Yeah, so it's a little bit about us here in Israel, Palestine. But let me tell you a little bit about our signature trips, our Telos peacemaking journeys. First off, if you or anyone has visited Israel or the Palestinian territories, you know how vibrant and dynamic this place is, all in a very tiny area. So the whole land between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River is about a 2-hour drive at its widest and a 6-hour drive from north to south. So on a trip, we'll get to cover a lot of space in the span of a week on the ground. But that, of course, isn't special to Telos. Most tour groups will cover kind of the same amount of space, but we'll go to different areas than we do. But this place is at the heart of the cradle of civilization, right? So there's a lot to learn and see here. We'll visit many of the often frequented holy sites like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Nativity, and all the holy sites around the Sea of Galilee. But we'll also take you to places deep inside the West Bank that have huge religious significance that many people don't know even exist. But that's just one of the things that Telos trips to Israel, Palestine, that's how they're different. Our peacemaking journeys, as we like to call them, are made up of some key features. First is food, as you're seeing, and it's a central part of the culture. And because this place has a rich history and culture, we also want you to get a taste for the rich culinary world that this region has to offer, which means that we won't be eating at the hotel buffets. We'll actually go enjoy the restaurants where locals would go or enjoy in-home hospitality with both Palestinian and Israeli hosts, by the way. So one of the signature things we do on all trips is a Shabbat dinner on Friday evenings. And so if you sign up for a trip, that's something that you'll get to enjoy. And it's a 2-3 hour long kind of ceremony with food and discussion. And it's always a highlight for a lot of folks. Second is that this will be an eye-opening, transformative life experience. And that kind of comes at a price, because during the trip, your emotional strings will be pulled in every direction, from extreme joy to sadness over some of what you'll see. So the second kind of signature Telos feature of our trips is our care for our fellow travelers. We'll process together during the trip and make sure any special needs or requests are met in order for you to have the most comfortable trip as you're experiencing, some truly life-changing emotional things. Also, our trips are all inclusive, but not in the traditional kind of tourist sense. But our version of that is that all your accommodation, meals, beverages will be covered, but so will gratuities to guides and drivers, or even your water on the bus. So you literally won't need to worry about anything more than buying gifts and souvenirs and occasional alcoholic beverage. And that brings us to our final and most important aspect of Telos Trip, and that's what we believe peacemakers are: amazing listeners and know how to harness the power of story. And so we'll be going all across Israel and the Palestinian territories, to places where many visitors don't go or even care to go. And we'll meet with the people and learn from their stories. And I'm not talking about the ancient history, even though we'll also have licensed guides that, have the entire 5,000-year history of this place memorized. But what we do is take a deep dive into the modern Israeli-Palestinian conflict through the meetings that we do, and we enter people's homes and share their meals, and really get to know people in their home environments, and see how they live, and see all that you usually hear about in the news from their firsthand experiences. And guess what? It's usually not what they report on the news. So that's just kind of an overview of our trips. And I'll let Todd speak more to our faith-based pilgrimages. Todd?
Thanks, Jack. Well, this is such a treat to be able to talk about these trips, since we haven't been able to do them in so long. We've done over 100 trips in the last 10 years, and then we've had this pause as the whole world has slowed down. And I'm eager to get back, just seeing these photos and hearing Jack talk about what we get to do there. I normally lead 6 of these groups a year, and it's just such a highlight to be able to take people into this reality that in some ways is so familiar to us and yet so far away, and familiar especially to people of faith, and especially Christians. This is the site of most Christian pilgrimage in the world, or at least the most important Christian pilgrimage site in the world is this place that we also call the Holy Land, for obvious reasons. And what I like to do with Christian groups, which is primarily the groups that I lead over, are help them go on what I think is a really authentic Christian pilgrimage, where we not just try to walk where Jesus walked, and we will spend, maybe 25% of our time doing that, walking in the sites of Jesus' life and ministry, visiting the place of his birth in Bethlehem, the place of his ministry around the Sea of Galilee, and Capernaum, his boyhood home of Nazareth, visiting the most important sites in Jerusalem, the Mount of Olives, the Garden of Gethsemane, and of course, the place where he was crucified and resurrected in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We do all of that, but we also, in a very connected way, try to walk where Jesus would walk today. And we enter into the lives of the real people who live in this modern Holy Land today in Israel and Palestine. And we meet with Palestinians and Israelis, with Jews, Christians, and Muslims, learning about their story, their contemporary experiences of living both in this beautiful and ancient and historic land and in this place of conflict for the last many decades. And we learn along the way from people about that reality, but also about the work of peacemaking, of justice, of conflict resolution, of coexistence, and those sorts of things. And we come away from this equipped to think about our own Christian faith in broader and deeper ways. And so again, I try to help people see that these two parts of a Christian pilgrimage that Telos does are not separate. It's not that we are sort of doing the ancient and the biblical stuff, and then we're doing all this sort of modern political stuff. we're actually trying to take all the ancient and biblical stuff, all the things that Jesus taught, and try to figure out how do we embody that today? How do we live out Jesus' teachings in the very place where he taught these things? How do we enter into this space in the posture of someone who's truly trying to follow Jesus, who told us things about loving our enemies and told us that peacemaking, that the peacemakers are blessed, and told us and demonstrated us the importance of reaching across the lines that we create of difference between us, and meeting the people that you're actually not supposed to meet with, and doing the things you're not supposed to do, and disrupting these sort of status quos that develop over time. And so this is just a really powerful journey when you think of it in that way, when you tie these two things together into a coherent whole. And that's one of the beautiful things we get to do with Christian groups at Telos, is help them to go on to much deeper faith journey and to a much richer pilgrimage than many have ever experienced before. Even those who've been in the land before on a traditional pilgrimage will come back and say that this is a much better way to actually go deeply into their own faith when they enter into the lives of the real people that are there in this way.
Thanks, Todd. So Todd talked about our faith-based trips, but it's important to also note that we often also work with non-faith communities, because the whole purpose of Telos is not to just be a tourist agency or to organize trips. Our purpose is to equip Americans to become peacemakers. And so there's often there's an action, and you become part of a community of peacemakers following your trip. And so if you know Telos and you've heard about Telos, you know that oftentimes the way most of our trips have been organized in the past has been that groups travel with their communities. So oftentimes it's people know each other, or come from the same region or church or organization. But actually, for the first time, we're launching our first sign-up trip for solo travelers, which means that anyone can sign up on a travel page, register, and experience a peacemaking journey in Israel, Palestine, starting next year. And this is because for a long time, and usually towards the end of our trips, people will often come up to me and say, how can I get my friend or uncle or spouse on one of these trips? So if you know someone that, if you've been on a trip and know someone that really needs to see what you saw and experience what you experienced, and now is the time. Now that option is available. So if you're on the call today and you're one of our alumni, spread the word and let your friends know that this is now available. And I think David just shared a link to a registration form that you can fill out. And the dates for that trip are May 7th to the 15th of 2022. And we will be following up as soon as we have more clarity on how travel will be in next year. But basically, it will be our 8-day on the ground journey. And based on registrants, we'll know what the standard of accommodation will be. And we'll be following up with all interested registrants.
And we're excited to offer this as a first time attempt to just let anybody who wants to come on a trip come, because our model has always been, and will continue to be, that we take people in community with each other, or people in groups that have the ability to be in community on the other side of trips. Because that the whole purpose of the trip is to, again, invite you in a way that allows you to then understand the reality and become active around what you know in ways that support the flourishing of all the people in the land, to create to create U.S. interventions into the conflict that are pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian, and pro-peace, as we describe it, that work for mutual flourishing. And so we do that in community in almost all of our cases. So the other thing to mention is, for anyone on the call today who's interested in travel and you think you might be able to pull together a group from your own community, and that's not at all, we've talked a lot about Christian pilgrimage on here today, but we also take a lot of other communities outside the Christian tradition on these trips. And so if you have any kind of community or a group of people that you'd like to go on this journey with, and see it as an ongoing journey, not just a trip together, but seeing as a way for you to enter into something both beautiful and difficult and heartbreaking and inspiring and all those things together as a longer journey, then also please be in touch with us about that. And I think we have some questions, Jack, if you want to start taking the questions that are in the chat.
Yes, I see a question from Claire about price of trip and COVID restrictions. So the price of the trip is going to rely on, basically depend on the accommodation level of the trip. And so part of the form you'll see, there'll be a question about what accommodation level people are interested in. And so we'll basically go with the majority of interest. But in there, we've also noted the price ranges, so you get an idea of what each trip level costs. And in terms of COVID restrictions, this is something that's changing week to week, even day to day currently. So we are hoping and planning for trips to be coming back, of course, with some restrictions. Currently, travel is for foreign travelers is not permitted yet in Israel. We were supposed to see trips start coming back in July this month, but then the reports came out that there's a new strain, and so the government is trying to grapple with that in the moment. But there's been a lot of talk about what COVID restrictions will be like. They'll need to, travelers will need to submit a PCR test 72 hours before coming, and need to be vaccinated upon arrival, before arriving in Israel.
How do we do all this in 8 days, Jack?
How do we do all this in 8 days? It's not a leisurely trip. You'll have a lot of fun and you'll eat good food, but it's we try to include most of the experiences, because you're in the country maybe once in a lifetime or even twice in a lifetime. But so we were trying to do a lot in a limited amount of time. But we do it, and we do it through a narrative arc. And so you're experiencing this whole thing as a unfolding story. So you won't have a lot of downtime, to be honest, and just sitting on the beach. If that's what you're interested in, maybe book a couple days before the trip starts or after the trip ends. And that's possible, because the program dates are going to be kind of back-to-back meetings throughout the day, and experiences, and as well as oftentimes dinner with the group, or dinner meeting with one of our hosts.
And because we always preferred smaller groups, that also allows us to be a little more agile in the land than some of the large, buses that have, 60 people on them. So we're a little bit more able to move quickly and get in and out of things too. But it's a very intense, but amazing experience.
I've taken that for granted, I guess. I haven't compared to the other tour groups. So yes, we usually travel at around 20 or even less people in the group, whereas other tour groups have 30 plus people. And so our whole experience is more intimate, and so it allows us to do more as well.
So Elizabeth has a question, Jack, about organizing a group from her church, or did she need to join the travelers? Maybe you can take that one. And what size of group do you prefer, she says?
Yes, so that would be kind of our original model, and please be in touch with me directly, and I can provide my email address here in the chat box. But basically, we will talk about the dates you're interested in for next year, what standard, and how many people you think would join this group. And so basically kind of the sweet spot for groups is about 15 to 20. Obviously, when you have less people, it's going to be a more expensive trip because trip costs are divided by a number of people in the group. And so if you want to make it a more accessible, affordable trip, we can even extend up to 25. But of course, everything comes at a cost. You have a larger group, and you tend to move a little bit slower, and everything like that. But we can discuss all that in more detail when you reach out, and I'll provide my email here in the chat. Can small children join the trip? Did I miss a question? I'm sorry, I'm scrolling up.
Yeah, Jenny and Dennis asked about international interfaith groups. Or intentional interfaith groups, I'm sorry. Do we host intentional? I misread. I'm gonna let you take the question, Jack, since I can't seem to read without my glasses on.
Yeah, so I mean, basically all of our trips are custom tailored with a basic kind of formula that we keep, but we do custom tailor the trips to our group. So an interfaith group would obviously include some more meetings or different meetings than a usual maybe Christian group or a group of business leaders or something like that. So we do custom tailor the trips, and we have plans for interfaith groups. Absolutely. When do we foresee taking groups? So that's an interesting question. We have some trips on the books for this fall, actually, and as soon as they're currently tentative and likely, but we haven't really booked all, everything is still tentative. We're hoping that by 2022, a lot of the restrictions and a lot of the uncertainty of travel will be lifted. And so, with certainty, I could say 2022 will be our year for going back and traveling with our friends.
And I've got a direct message from someone who's asking about how sort of physically fit and able do you need to be to do the trips, which I think is a great question, because I would say that there's a decent amount of walking. There's a little bit of climbing. There's some opportunities that we have to help with that. So we walk down the Mount of Olives instead of up it, which helps, but we also can drop you at the top and let you see, and then also drive you to the bottom and let you do that sort of thing. So there's some ways to accommodate you if those things are challenging. We've had people in we've had a few people in their upper 80s go on these trips. So there's definitely been folks that have been older and had certain conditions they had to deal with it. But I would say that as a general rule, you need to be in pretty decent health to be able to do the trip, because it is an intense experience. The days are long. There are some days that are more physically demanding than others. And so if you have a particular, issue or something, then you should just talk to us, and we can talk it through with you, whether or not you think that would be a good fit for your condition, and if there's a way that we could accommodate that as well.
Okay. There's a question from Virginia about small children joining the trip. We don't recommend children joining the trip for several reasons, but mostly because some of the experiences, whether it's going into a refugee camp or going through the Holocaust Museum, for instance, may not be appropriate for children. And so the option of bringing them with a nanny could be a possibility. It would have to be case by case basis, but in terms of the program, it's not fit for, I would say, younger than about high school students. We've done a high school group before, and they can process and they can speak about all the difficulties of the modern conflict and things like that. And so I would say that would probably be the minimum age range of older teens. We also have a question from Sadia about a Muslim group. We've had Muslims on groups, but we have not done a solely Muslim group before, but we'd be happy to. So I hope that answers that question. And Virginia also asked about a high school group, and yes, high school group would be appropriate. And from my experience, is a great age group to bring on because they, they're young, they're agile, and they can process everything that's going on in a really sharp way.
And I think you led the high school trip that we did a couple years
Yeah,
ago. And you said it was one of the more fun trips that you'd done. The kids were really engaged, and it was really, really fascinating for them. I've taken all of my kids when they are in high school at some point, or just about to enter college. I've taken at least 3 of my 4 kids. The youngest one has not gone yet, but they've all gone, and it's been a very transformative experience for them when they're about 16, 17, and 18, or 18 especially.
Yeah, that's a good age. I really enjoyed that trip. They surprised me because I thought, it'll be younger kids, they might not listen, but I think once they see the things that they study in classrooms or in books, come alive, and they meet with people and get to ask the questions directly to the people that are living certain situations. You just see their hunger for information come out, and it's incredible. Greg asked about reimbursement if one tests positive. That's a great question, Greg. Basically, we'd require that folks have insurance, health insurance or travel insurance to cover any COVID-related incidents, which is not included in the trip price. But these are some of the adjustments and new things that we're having to incorporate into our travel procedure.
And I just want to add one more thing in about how impactful these trips have been. Again, I'm personally a high functioning introvert, and so travel around the world with new people all the time is actually not my sort of main thing I do to get energy. But it gives me an enormous energy to lead these trips and to take people there because I've seen how transformative it is. And we have, again, taken a variety of folks from not just from faith communities, but artists and musicians and entrepreneurs and philanthropists on trips. And we've taken some members of Congress. And I remember taking a member of Congress on a trip who'd traveled a lot of places in the world as a member of Congress. And before, he'd been an Army Ranger and had been in different parts of the world. And he said this trip was one of the most, if not the most, powerful and transformative experience, travel experience you'd ever had. And if you look at our surveys and feedback, we get that over and over again. There's so much anecdotal information people have about how that this experience didn't just give them a new way to think about Israelis and Palestinians and that conflict, but it gave them a whole new set of glasses to see other challenges at home, which is why at Telos we've expanded some of our programming, including trip programming outside the Middle East. And so we're now doing a trip here in the United States called an American Pilgrimage. It's a journey through the American South where we try to take on our own American story with more fullness and more clarity and honesty about some of our historic issues that we are still struggling with. And that was really prompted by and motivated by the folks who've been with us in Israel Palestine. Said you did this for me there. Now let's do some of that same kind of work here in the United States. Give me a trip like that here. And Jack, I think there's another answer from Michael before we close out.
Yeah.
Another question from another answer from you.
Michael, how are you? It's good to see you on here. So you're asking about a rough range of what a trip would cost. It's tough to say because it's different trips include different things. So we do kind of basic trips at a very basic level of accommodation. But there are some aspects of the trips, as I mentioned, we'll always eat out in local restaurants where locals go to eat. And so that tends to increase the price a little bit. But basically, the trips could cost, and it also depends on the group size, but the trips could cost anywhere between about $2,500 to $2,700 per person in a double room, upwards of $5,000, depending on your level of accommodation, and all the amenities around the trip. So this is just a rough range in terms of, but it depends on each trip, because each trip is a different number of people, different amenities, different accommodation. And I'll just repeat that because I got a note that I cut it out, but I said the low range is about 2,700 per person in a double room. But as I mentioned, it's different for each group and each group size and accommodation.
And when we take you on these trips, we give you this really, this amazing experience, but we don't just leave you there. So we try to stay with you on a journey, and we see this as a journey. And one of the things that we've been able to do during the pandemic is really work more on what it looks like to keep you on a journey and help you really develop what you learn there into the kinds of action that lead you toward being communities of peacemakers here at home. And so one of our new programs that we're most excited about is kind of the companion to the Telos trip, which is called the Telos Table. And so we ask our communities on the other side of trips to consider staying together as a community. So many great things happen around the table on our Israel-Palestine trips. We share meals with people, we have great conversations with people and with ourselves. We process, and all those things happen around a table. And so we try to keep people on that journey, and we try to keep them connected to each other, and then orienting themselves as a group or a community toward doing something about what they have experienced and what they've learned and what they know. And so our Telos Table program is the new companion program to the trips. And those things happen right in your own community, right in your own neighborhood and in your own home. And if you're interested in those, do let us know about that too, because we can provide you more information about that. And there are a few folks on this call today who are part of the first cohort of table hosts that we've trained, people who've been mostly people in our trips, and they have volunteered for the last several months to learn about what it would look like to lead a community through these kinds of conversations toward action. And so even some of those folks are joining us today.
And Todd, I just got a question about what a regular schedule looks like. So we'll normally, of a daily schedule, normally go from about 8 a.m., 9 a.m. until just after dinner. Some dinners will be near the hotel without a guest, giving people time to process together, to take in the day. And we try to limit the number of dinners with guests, but there'll also be some when we're in the person's home, when we're being hosted, or sometimes we'll try to fit a speaker in over a meal and share the meal with them. And so we try not to go over 10 to 12 hours a day of Telos programming, but that's more or less. And so we'll be out during the day, have lunch together, and then come back. Sometimes we'll come back for an hour or so before dinner to freshen up, to relax a little bit, and then go back out for dinner. And that will be the day.
Jenny and Dennis ask if we have many Canadians joining us. I would say not nearly enough. So if you are Canadian and want to join us, we'd love to have you, and we'd love to bring a group from Canada. If you have some folks you want to bring on a trip, do let us know. I think you guys have been on a number of our webinars the last few months, and so we would be welcoming of the opportunity to take you and some Canadian friends on a trip.
What about South Africans?
Likewise,
Oh,
we're actually doing a trip to South Africa now as well. Our colleague Greg Khalil, the co-founder of Telos, is on here somewhere, and he's been leading some pilot trips down there.
it looks like that might be it for questions.
Great.
I just want to remind everyone that if you are interested in the sign up solo travelers trip, which will be next May, that form is shared in the chat box. For Elizabeth, if you're interested in, or anyone else that's interested in organizing a group trip, please reach out to me in the email that we provided also in the chat box. I'll send it out again. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.